Welcome to Sumbits, where we decode the PowerSchool development experience. Sumbits is brought to you by MBA. Let's start the show.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Sumbits. Took a little break after the new year, but happy to be back. See a couple new guests on the screen. We're going 5 this time. And topic of today is going to be a couple of these guys just got back from the ACME Conference down in Orlando. But of course, before we get too far into things, we got to figure out who we're with and what are we drinking. Joined, as always, by Ryan Cockrem and Eric Schaitel. And our guest today, Adam Larsen. We're going to say your name today. It's been a while since we've had you on here. Welcome back. And Jerome Ohnui from Michigan. Welcome. Good to have you.
Thank you.
I am, as always, drinking some bourbon today. Figure we got a bunch of Midwestern people other than our northern friend here, so I brought in a little Midwestern bourbon. If you guys have ever heard of Jeppson's, they're most famous for their Jeppson's Malort, but they do actually make a bourbon. For anybody that knows about Malort, I'm sorry. That's one of the worst things you'll ever have, but it's kind of a Chicago tradition. But they do make a bourbon, and it's actually pretty delicious. What are you guys drinking today, Ryan?
I've got a couple going here today. I've got it's a triple India Pale Ale by Strathcona called Headbanger. It's actually all right. It was the first time I tried it. It's all right. And then for after that one, this one I do like by Cockrem's. It's called Deja Vu. It's a Doppelbock. I can tell you it's dark and heavy and tasty.
Well, up in the land of snow, you're still allowed to drink dark beers, right?
Speaking of the land of snow, I have a beverage here today. Goes by the name of Road Slush. It's a real appealing name. And I realize I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. I keep on bringing in the New Glarus Brewery. The Spotted Cow is the famous one from New Glarus here in Wisconsin, and they only sell in Wisconsin. So maybe I should start bringing in a few things that our guests outside of Wisconsin can get in their homes. But maybe also this will entice them to come visit me in Wisconsin. If you're ever in the Madison area, swing by. Because I live about a mile away from the Capitol Brewery in Madison, Wisconsin, in Middleton, technically. And we can go sit on the in the beer garden, listen to some music, and talk nerd stuff.
I was thinking maybe after 2 years, we're still trying to get sponsored by New Glarus.
And 2 years, by the way.
Hey, cheers to 2 years, fellas. Adam, what are you sipping on today?
Sporting a Dr. Pepper today.
The hard stuff.
That's
The
right.
DP.
23
Pulled out
flavors.
of the fridge at work. It's delicious. A little late in the day for caffeine, so we're taking it easy.
Living the wildlife. What about you, Drum?
I have got my grown-up soda pop, truly hard seltzer. I'm a fan of the tropical pack.
So my wife drinks a lot of those. And have you seen the High Noon pool packs?
I've seen the cans. I haven't actually tried one.
Not gonna lie, I'll turn in my man card and still say I thoroughly enjoy a good seltzer every now and again. But anyway, let's get into it, fellas. So the three of you actually were in attendance at the PSUG ACME Conference in Orlando. And at this point, this was what, a couple weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago? I had the pleasure of being there either 2 or 3 years ago, don't remember. Absolutely enjoyed my time there, but realized I was way out of my league. Sounds like I'm still subject to a couple jokes with amongst the crowd. But I honestly, I haven't heard anything about what you guys are working on there. If what I assume is true, this may be a very short episode and you guys really didn't get anything done. It was just more hanging out, but that's up to you guys to tell me. I know, Ryan, you've been to an ACME before, correct?
Yeah, the first couple.
Been a few years.
Yeah.
So catch us up, fellas.
It was a good old time, that's for sure. It was a lot of fun, but
Well, you've never talked about ACME on here before, right? So we probably should cover some of the.
Yeah, so I think the only time that ACME was ever mentioned is when we were probably at one of our live ones at one of the PSUG events conferences where Joe had mentioned it a couple times. I think we may have mentioned some of the projects that came out of it, but never really talked about ACME as a whole.
Okay, well, as a whole, we definitely mentioned it because we would have explained where the namesake for the podcast came from.
That's
We have done that.
At least as an introduction, right?
Right. Now, Adam, have you been to all of them?
I have been to
Yes.
all of them. All the ones that are standalone events. Yeah, we don't count the like at the end of a conference where we have like an afternoon where we kind of like sort of work on stuff. Yeah, I've been to all of them. Eric, you too, right?
Indeed. Yes.
Yeah.
And I would agree, Adam. I'd turn it over to you if for those folks that maybe aren't familiar with what an ACME is. Can you catch us up to speed there, my friend?
Yeah. So the first time that we got together, it was after a regular old PSUG. It was the PSUG Southeast in Myrtle Beach a couple years ago. And I think Joe kind of proposed, hey, would you like to do an advanced period of time where you just work on, teaching each other advanced things, building some stuff, kind of a hackathon idea. And we kicked around a bunch of notions and went into the first one like, we're not really sure what we're going to do, but we all have hotel rooms and our districts let us be here for a couple of extra days. So we have to make use of it. And I know that we came in with the desire to like create stuff because like Ryan and I worked in a room together making a thing. Like we jammed away on an idea of a problem we wanted to solve, but also interspersed was this like teaching each other advanced concepts. So like, let's talk about the API, let's talk about Git, let's talk about, the best practices we have with database extensions. So if you're kind of new to this and you want to be a real customizer and building advanced things, we've got a spot for people to pick up one of those topics and teach it to each other. It's really a kind of a flat room at that point where people are offering suggestions. They're saying, I've tried this before. So someone's kind of teaching, but it's more informal than I think even another session might be at a PSUG.
It's like almost like one person coding with a bunch of people over the shoulder.
Yeah.
Yeah,
a lot of breathing in your ears while you're.
And I mean that in a good way because it's like
Yeah.
a bunch of people going, "Why don't you try this?"
Right.
A lot of Mountain Dew and Cheeto breath over your ears.
Yeah. A lot of neck beard, rubbing against your shoulders. As we all nerd
It's
on
a
each other.
good tickle, though. It's a good.
Yeah,
tickle.
I mean neck beard in a good way. So we over time have kind of settled into sort of a rhythm where like we have rooms that are working on projects. We have a cycle of like showing people stuff. We teach these advanced concepts. We have to break in a bunch of new people. There's always new people at each event, and that's sort of the calendar. The focus really is on trying to build something and then getting out there for the community. That's really our goal. And there's a couple of things that have been delivered, which we'll talk about here as we go. Am I forgetting anything with like what the point of this is, Eric or Jerome?
No.
Right.
It's about right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That was one of the goals that Joe, for anyone who doesn't know the reference, Joe Miller is the founder, if you will, of PSUG events, puts on the regional PSUG conferences, and he wanted to have a place for the Uber nerds to get together. And like you said, Adam, he wanted a product to come out of these. He wanted us to build things. And he also wanted to make sure, he was very adamant that whatever comes out of this is something that's freely available to the PowerSchool community. So we've made the plugins that we've created in these ACME conferences available. We can put a link in this session, I think, right, Sean? It's going to be easyredpro.com/acme.php. And we've got a website up there that shows off the plugins that we've put together. Again, we'll talk some more about what we built here in the last couple of weeks ago in Orlando. Some of it was adding new features to plugins that we'd already published. Some of it was creating new stuff that hadn't existed before. So not all of that content is out on the website that I mentioned just yet. Some of it we're putting a little extra polish on. We still collaborate, all the folks that went to ACME, we still collaborate online to make sure that we've got something that's ready for prime time.
For sure. Before we get too far, Jerome, how many of these ACMEs have you been to, and what kind of got you first into that crew?
This last one was my second one. So my first one was in October, November of 2021. And that was kind of convenient for me since it was local to me. So, not a huge bit of traveling. But
yeah, I was going to mention that the only one that I've been to was the one that you were at. And somehow we got roped into going to a wonderful part of the country known as Detroit, Michigan. And now this year they're in Orlando. So how that worked out, I'm not sure, but alas.
Yeah.
So, Jerome, I'm glad you got to go back to maybe a little nicer location this year.
Yeah, it was pretty special. So when I first heard about it, it was a couple of years ago, like pre-pandemic, and Joe and the crew wanted to get ACME going again. And so registration opened, and I thought, my partner in my department, in my district, and we're gonna throw our hats into the ring and see what happens. And then everything fell apart in the entire world, and ACME didn't happen, and so it got rescheduled to the 21 event. And then from that point on, it's like I am among my people. This is where I want to be. And of course, like others had mentioned, it's a big learning event. It's a big learning opportunity. I walk in, and one of the best things that Adam can say during the introduction is, despite your imposter syndrome, thinking that you don't belong here, you actually do belong here, and so you have things to contribute. You have things to learn. So that to me was a very appealing, setup for the entire event, and so that got me excited to go to this most recent one.
Adam, I don't remember you saying those words to me, so
no.
That's,
in fact,
that's a new part.
If I remember that correctly, I said that in Detroit and said, you all belong, you have something to contribute, and I gave just a long enough pause. Then I said, except for Sean.
I mean,
no one knows why he is here.
I had contributions, just maybe not go.
And I was supposed to go to that one, except at the last minute, the rules around flights and testing and entering my country and exiting my country made it that it just wasn't potentially feasible. When at that point, I would have got stuck in the U.S. for 2 weeks if I tested positive.
And such a fantastic part of town, too.
Romulus, Michigan.
And for the record, Sean was sent along because it was felt that I needed a chaperone. And
We'll
somehow Sean's name bubbled to the top of the list.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well.
So I would say that we engage in a pretty strong effort to set it up that way, that everyone is able to contribute in a meaningful way. Even if you're, just offering suggestions, or you're there consuming and learning as people develop. It's nice to see things get developed collaboratively. So you see what it's like to share code and, check in and check out branches and do merges and like the tools of the trade. If you're by yourself in a district, you just don't see that. You're probably a one-person show. And so you don't end up working in an environment where collaboration is really important. You're the only one writing the code, right? So we set it up that way so that everyone not only feels like they belong at the event, but also that they have a responsibility in a way to contribute. If you're here, you should be offering something. And then I would say that over the last couple of times, we've tried to have it continue beyond the event. So really creating something that's not just the hackathon, but also like an open source community where this work continues even after we're no longer together, because that just hasn't existed in PowerSchool land. Everyone's really isolated. Sometimes districts don't want to share stuff, or they're afraid of supporting it or whatever. We're creating this space where people can work together virtually, even as we're not together. The tools are more sophisticated than they've ever been for doing that kind of work. So these projects ought to continue and be iterated on even when we're not in person together. And I think we're getting pretty close to that happening.
Can I jump back on one thing just because I want to make sure no one listening would feel otherwise? You said if you're there, you should be contributing. But sometimes you're not able, it's not like you have to be able to contribute. So don't feel guilty if you aren't able to contribute. It's more that you're you want to find a way for everyone to contribute if possible. But if you're there to learn, then right, isn't that good too?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be code. So the contributions are also like, that's not going to work because my district does this. Like you bringing your insight as a part of the contribution. There's plenty of people that have, not written any code while they've been there, but they've offered really good suggestions or beta tested or, managed the whiteboard while we were sketching things out. Because those are skills too that the projects need. Everything needs a project manager and that kind of stuff. So everyone's in that room doing something.
I remember it was literally over my shoulder, that first one. And that's when I learned what the toggle method was for jQuery. I didn't know toggle. I was just going, show, hide, show, hide, show, hide. Like, well, why don't you use toggle? I was like, well, what's toggle?
Because I didn't know about it. I think the biggest thing for me was seeing feasibility of things, right? Because like for somebody that isn't in the code all day, every day, just having an idea of it and seeing the brainstorming that happens in that group. And for everybody that's listening, like if you've ever been to a PSUG events conference, a regional event or something, and you maybe go through the SQL classes or the JavaScript classes, and even if you take the whole series, you're not really doing a lot of the work in those classes. And even if there is a lot of work, that's still, 3-4 hours out of your day. When I say that these guys would get up in the morning, race down to the conference room, and we would be there until 10, 11 of midnight at night, and people coding the entire time, because it was genuinely fun for everybody to hang out and see what we could get done in that short amount of time. So if nothing else, for me, it was seeing the feasibility of things and kind of how things done and seeing the logic behind it. And honestly, it's just kind of fun to watch you guys work. So before we get we could talk about kind of how it's branched out and grown over the years, but I really wanted to get an idea of what project you guys actually worked on this year. Eric, sounds like they're not out on the website right now, but going back to the one that I was at in I guess Jerome said it was 2021. Were any of those projects still the projects that you guys worked on this year? And if so, which ones were they? What did you guys work on? And was there anything new?
One of the projects was a continuation. And I think one of the most popular downloads from the ACME website is the test score display. Now, this one is a baby of a couple of our former guests, Roger Sprick and Jim Parsons. They had developed this for use within their own district and brought it to ACME back in 2021 when you first arrived.
Yep.
And they said, hey, we have this thing, but we think we can make it better, and we think we can share it with the community. And this seems like a good forum to make it better and to share it. So that's what they did. In 2021, we released that. That's already been out and downloadable from the ACME website for a long time. And Roger actually just 2 nights ago, I want to say, sent me an updated version of that plugin. So that one is the results of ACME are already published to the website in terms of further enhancements to the test score display. And the idea behind the test score display is, if you're familiar with tracking test scores in PowerSchool, and I'm not intimately familiar with this, so Adam or anybody else help me out if you're familiar and I stumble a little bit. But the idea is the navigation as you navigate to a student page and view their test scores. There's a lot of clicking around. You click here to see some scores. You click here to dig further into this one. And then you click again, maybe. The idea was to make everything available and visible from a single page. And so they did that. That was the initial step. And then to build upon that this year, they added some additional bells and whistles and color coding for scores that may have fallen above or below a certain threshold. A few other features that I know that they had added in there. Adam, if you remember any specifics beyond that, feel free to throw that out.
Yeah, so the coloration was new this year. So the first iterations of it were like really the idea that you can pivot the scores. So like each event is something, and then it lists out the scores in columns. That's what you're looking for, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was in there. They added, I should have asked Roger. I was actually just talking to him a couple hours ago. I forgot to prompt him on what they worked on, but yeah, that's the basics of it.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So
And
kind of going back to the organization of it, because at this point people are like, you all were there, why don't you know all the details of each project? So like, how many different projects were you guys working on at Acme this year? Was it still 4 or 3 this year?
Yeah, 3.
So typically, I mean, again, I've just been to the one, but I assume it's been this way every time, is everybody kind of gravitates toward one of the 3 projects that interest them the most, or maybe it's a technology that they're going to be using in that project that interests them the most, and that's kind of how it breaks out. So Jerome and Adam, which projects were you guys involved in this year?
Go for it, Jerome.
Yep, I was in the group for modifying and improving Power Scheduler. One of the things that we had discussed in like the first day of just tossing out and brainstorming ideas on what we could work on. It was brought up that Power Scheduler, among a couple of other features, seemed to have been kind of left behind as far as development and improvement goes by PowerSchool. So yeah, okay, it functions, but how could we make it better? So we decided, okay, well, there are a couple of things that we could try. So let's just go off into a room and throw the spaghetti at the wall and see what we can do. Right. So we just started going over, and this is also a part where you may or may not be actively involved with the actual hands-on coding, but a person's expertise will really come in handy here. Because in our room, and I want to give a shout out to our compatriots from Maine, Paula and Naomi. They had not only their own hands-on expertise of scheduling, on a day-to-day basis, but they came up with like really great ideas. Rami also came up with really great ideas on, this is how this report looks, or this is how this screen looks. I think it stinks. Here's how we would like to make it better. And so we just, we took those ideas, threw them into the issues pile, and said, okay, well, we've got this pile of spaghetti. Let's pick a noodle and start going with it. And so that's what we ended up doing.
So did you guys attack more of the reporting side of Power Scheduler, or more functionality?
I think we did a little bit of both. One of the big things that we wanted to attack was the ubiquitous associate button, where it kind of pulls up another screen. You have to click on this, then click on that, click on this yet again, and then finally bring it into the main page that you want to use it for. That's an extra lot of clicks. So one of the big things that was worked on was, how do we make that a little bit more modern, and not have to rely on so many clicks to open windows, pop-ups there, and so on and so forth. So that was a bit of the functionality that we worked on. We also did a little bit of improvement on the reports, not just the function of it, but also how it looks aesthetically, so you can actually get visually the information that you want right away, instead of having to like, where am I looking? Why is this not here? Where? I can't find the details that I need, that kind of stuff. We wanted to avoid that. So we did a lot of improvement, both in function and in reporting.
Yeah, so if I could tack onto that, I happened to be in the same room as Jerome during the ACME conference, and as he said, a big thing was just making the ease of use, the navigation a lot easier through Power Scheduler. So I want to stress that when we say we did some customizations to Power Scheduler, there was no attempt to rewrite the scheduling engine or anything crazy like that. We just tried to make the interface more accessible and more user-friendly for folks. Tidying up some of the reports, like you said, adding extra columns to reports where like this data would really be helpful in that report, but it's not there. Implementing a PowerSchool grid widget, which makes a report, makes the table sortable and adds client-side pagination, just basically modernizing it in ways that they've done, as Jerome said, all over PowerSchool. But for some reason, Power Scheduler has been neglected for a long time. You can tell when you look at the code behind those pages that this is stuff that hasn't been touched for a decade. So, and it was neat. I was really excited about this project because there's a lot that we could do. There was a lot of low-hanging fruit, so to speak, to grab and replace those associate buttons with smart searches and make life easier. And this one is just, if it's popular, it's so scalable. I mean, next year there will be more reports that we haven't gotten to yet. There will be more user interfaces that can be cleaned up. And I hope in the spirit of Acme and coming back to this, that it will be an evolving product.
One of the things that we spend a lot of time laboring on as planners, and so I mean, we should actually give a tip of the hat to the people who aren't here who helped plan this. So Eric and I, and then Roger and Rami plus Joe are the 5 that meet and put this together. We labor on.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but Joe doesn't really help at all. He facilitates, but you know.
He doesn't even host the Zoom call. What are you talking about?
I'm sorry, Adam. Please continue.
No, Joe. I mean, he is the one who's shopping for locations and gets us all set up with. That's all stuff that none of us have any experience with, maybe except for Rami. Like booking a conference center and not paying $1,000 a gallon for coffee, and Joe's the one who works those kind of deals. So the 5 of us spent a lot of time trying to figure out what are the right sized projects to work on, because we have in the past said we want to do this thing, and we get halfway into it and realize that thing will take this amount of time, which means at the end of the time that we're together, it's not like it's sort of done and it can be iterated on. It's like, this doesn't work at all. Like, we don't have enough built for this to be like even showable for another year. Like, we got to wait on this. And so we've adopted this notion of trying to build something as small as possible to begin with and then iterate on that. We use an analogy from the agile world of, don't try to build a car where you start with all 4 wheels and try to put a body on it. You begin with a skateboard, then you put the handlebars on it, then you put the second wheel on, and you go from a skateboard to a scooter to a motorbike to a car. And what I loved about how they teed this one up was we really have some extremely quick things that we can win on. And if we ship this as a plugin, people will be thrilled immediately. And so they made this like long list of, I don't know what you had, 15 or 20 things you wanted to fix. And it was like, aside from deciding, we're going to use grid widget where we can, we're going to use smart searches where we can. Okay, now go. Like, after that setup was done, it was really a matter of just knocking those things out one at a time. And if you got to 7 instead of 10 of those things, no one would notice or care. You could code till the minute that the conference was over and walk away, and you were just as done as if you'd had another day, in terms of you didn't leave it in a lurch. And that was a really good project for this because of that, because each of those bytes was small enough to get done.
Cool. I remember I want to throw it back to how you guys separate. I don't know, since I haven't been to the last couple, but the first conference, I know Eric spent a lot of time at that time around in another room, kind of, helping around. Has that happened again with anyone else, or
have we had an advanced help desk again, like you were doing? Advanced project fixing guy. That's like out of Happy Gilmore. Come see the amazing golf ball whacker guy. Come see the amazing plug-in fixer guy.
Yeah, so that's evolved. Our first year around, I kind of did not participate personally in the projects we were trying to build. I sat in a separate room, and basically folks would maybe step out of their room, a project they were working on for a while, and come in and we'd chat about something they were working on to get a little one-on-one help. That was cool, but it kind of sucked that I didn't get to participate in the building piece. So that's evolved into more of, we now kind of more build time into, because also I don't know everything about everything, right? Someone's going to come to me talking about customizing PowerTeacher Pro, and I have very little experience about that. So we just try to build more time into the conferences now, rather than dedicating one room for one-on-one help to time to collaborate, because then Adam's going to go, hey, I'm stuck on this thing I'm doing in PT Pro, and I'm going to go, good luck with that. And Ryan's going to go, hey, we can talk about that.
Well, I feel like that's evolved a lot, using the tools outside of the conference, because you guys have a Slack channel now, and it really is part of building that community where, I feel like the point of that separate room was, hey, I've been working on this project. I didn't know who I had to go to for help. Now I'm part of this community. And instead of I have to come to you in this room for those 3 hours one afternoon, I now have kind of access to you throughout the year. And again, it's more collaborative throughout the year instead of just during the conference.
It is. That channel has been good for, I've got an advanced concept and I don't really want to discuss it in a place where someone's going to go, hey, I want that plugin, or how do I install plugins? You know, like that part of our community, of the greater PSUG community, just isn't there. And so it's a safer place to discuss more of the advanced topics.
Right.
Not that you can't talk about them anywhere, but like there are times where I'm like, hey, a room full of developers, let's talk about this thing. And then no one's going to go, hey, can you send me that zip file and then help me install it and support it when it doesn't work? Like there are just times I don't want to have that chat, you know?
That's fair. So test scores and then power scheduler updates. So what was the third topic?
Yeah, before I talk about the room that I was in, I wanted to hit the other thing that we did in 21, sorry, in Detroit, was we had a room where for 3 days we just talked about the API. There were a lot of people who wanted to know how to use the API, server-side coding, internal stuff, building Power Queries, all that kind of stuff. And so I facilitated in that room, and that really was like a formal teaching thing, but like formal in the sense that I had a lot of slide decks prepared and I was up at the front doing my thing for the whole time. But it was a lot of like, does anybody know if you can do this? And I'd be like, I don't know. Let's try to break the API. And we would spend, an hour on a diversion, but we all had time and everyone was captive. Like we all just were enthralled with, okay, what if we try this? And people are yelling out suggestions like, okay, let's try this. Let's try this. What if we shape the payload this way? And we learned, like we wrote all that stuff down. So we found we found bugs, we found holes, we found all kinds of stuff that we didn't know was there. Or, people are like, I've tried this 3 different times and never gotten this to work. Why doesn't it work? And someone in the room would know, and we would try it and then write that down somewhere in a notebook, and then we knew how to do it. So that's the other kind of model we've had. And that really came out of the survey. Someone, there was a lot of people that said, I really want to use the API. And I was like, man, could we really do a project that uses the API in 3 days? I don't know, but we certainly could teach it. And it was a popular room. We had a lot of people in there that year that wanted to see it. And people referenced it many times. Like, remember when we did this thing and we thought we could try that? Like people remembered what they learned in that room. So that was the other model. Okay, so the room that I was in.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before you go on, we do have one other thing posted from previous years to the ACME downloads, plugin downloads, and it's not a PowerSchool plugin, but it's a Python PowerSchool module. Is that anything you wanted to touch on at all?
We can talk about it now, sure. So I'm doing a lot of server-side work with the API, both PowerSchool's API and Schoology's API, and I was frustrated with the amount of code I had to write every time I wanted to interact with it. And so I started building like a helper library, like a wrapper for the API for my own internal use. And it greatly simplified all the work that I was doing in my scripting. I have a lot of ETL tasks and things that hit the API, and it wrapped all that up. And the more I worked on it, I said, 2 things. I want other people's feedback on it, and also like other people should be contributing to this. And so I kind of donated it. I built it for my school district, but I just like, as I happen with other things, that got shared now as a Python library that you can pip install. So you can download the wheel file, you can install it, and then immediately start making API calls. And that's technically now an ACME project. Free license. If you're a vendor and you want to use it, it's free for you to use in all of your stuff and make money off of it. We would love it if you would, because then you'll find things that it needs to do. And PRs are open. You can submit something you want in there. You don't use it, right? Because you don't write any Python, Eric?
Correct.
Yeah. So yes, that's the other thing. So I'm kind of the admin on that one, but I would love to have collaborators on it. So if anybody wants to add features to it, PRs are open. It's out on Bitbucket. So feel free to hop in and contribute. Okay, so the room that I was in, so this is a kind of a story that turned into a project. So a couple of different times, this has happened to me.
This is my surprise face.
Yeah, right. That there's a story.
Yeah, weird.
Yeah. So a couple of times this has happened where a teacher will accidentally delete an assignment in the grade book and then go, hey, is there any way to recover that? And I'll, the first couple times I would say, well, those two different times you had to say yes, delete, and I know that I'm getting rid of scores. Those words mean something. You should probably read them because it's gone. No, there's no magic trash can that I can fish this out of. Until I found out there is a magic trash can that I can fish it out of. And that's, you can write queries against the Oracle database using flashback syntax. You can kind of roll a table back for an instant and get data out of there. And it is like shaking an empty hat and out comes data. It's kind of incredible how it works.
Ryan, you know anything about that?
I learned that from Adam, the first Acme, and I've been using it. Yeah, no, I've every time I use it, I've said, yeah, I learned this from Adam.
It was one of those.
I'm curious, by the way, in listening, that would be in Oracle SQL, that would be as of syntax, yes?
That is correct.
So if you want to Google that, friends, Oracle SQL as of.
It is not the as_of search that you use on the homepage of PowerSchool to find kids who are no longer enrolled. That's a different search. But this actually, for the duration of your transaction, it allows you to look at that table as of a timestamp. So if a teacher, talking to sysadmins here, if a teacher calls you and says, I deleted this 5 minutes ago, you can write your query and say as of 10 minutes ago, and that table will look like it is 10 minutes ago when you write your query, and your data will come out as such. So what happens here is that every now and again it'll occur. And usually what happens, this is the scenario, if you're like, how does the teacher do that? It's super easy for them to do, because if they accidentally put an assignment in all of their classes, and then they go back at the end of the term and they look in their homeroom and they're like, well, test number 4 doesn't need to be in here. Why is this in my homeroom? And they go to delete it. It will prompt them and say, you're deleting this for all of your classes, but they don't realize it. Like, it's easy to just skip over that and say, and then when they do that, then it deletes it from all of their classes and the scores are gone. As far as they can see, they're gone. So they'll call and say, hey, how fast can you restore this? And depending on how important it is and what the situation is, we might restore the data pump from yesterday to the test server and query it out if I can't do it this way that I'm about to describe. But I will write this query and say, okay, I'll roll this back 60 minutes, 30 minutes, what's there? And then I get the scores, and then I email them to the teacher. And my favorite was one of the first times I ever did this, a teacher did it, and I was off campus that day, and I wrote the query for her, I got the data out, and I sent it to her, and she goes, okay, well, now how do you restore it? Like, how do you put them back in? I'm like, no, you put them in. You're keying this. It's a miracle that we got these scores out of the database. I can't impress upon this to you enough. This
Good
is
luck,
amazing.
They never understand what it took to do it. They just want to know how it can be done quicker.
Okay, yeah, those are
magic.
Say, especially when you make it seem really easy.
No. So that's the setup for this, is that it's possible to do it, but it is cumbersome and you have to act very fast. So the idea we had in our room was, what if we could create for the teachers an interface where when they have an oopsie, they can jump out of PTP and there's an interface where they can choose like a different timestamp and say, show me my grade book as of this moment. And then the grades just kind of tumble out like Sonic's rings when he runs into a spike. Like, oh, here are all of my scores. I will now, key them back in. Yeah, exactly.
I just got to throw out, you can tell when someone's a father when the word oopsie is in the vocabulary.
Thing, man. I was like, the Adam of 8 years ago would never have said oop. Well, maybe he would have said oopsie.
Maybe. Yeah. When you have a 5 and an almost 2-year-old, your lexicon changes. Yeah, so that was the interface that we sought out to do, and we got bogged down a little bit in an idea early on, and that didn't leave us as much time as we wanted to have for the other stuff. So it ended up that the interface is really nothing to look at, but under the hood, it's amazing. And all credit here to Corey Hilliard. I've never seen a dude bash his head against a database for as long as I watched Corey do this. So he was in the metadata of Oracle, finding like all the available timestamps, because we desperately wanted to have this interface to let teachers go, show me all the points that I can roll back to. What are all my save points? And figured it out. So like we have now a spot where you can say like, I have a timestamp from 30 minutes ago and from 45 minutes ago and 70 minutes ago, but it's only the ones where something has changed. Like
nice.
Yeah, it's insane what he created. It's absolutely amazing. And then I would say in our room, like I kind of set up the AngularJS like shell of it. Corey was working really hard on database. Mike Yashevsky was working really hard on Angular stuff, like the service used to shuttle the data back and forth. And then Tejas Ambani, by the way, the creator of Blue Steel, was at Acme.
And that's probably the part I missed the most.
Oh, man,
I've never met him.
So great. It was so great having Tate. I get to see him all the time because he's an Illinois guy, so he's in our local meetings. But most everyone else there had never met him before, and it was great to see him.
I met him for the first time
in person with the community.
Didn't like it.
I didn't even hear most of that. I just heard didn't like it.
Didn't like him. Yeah.
Tejas, if you're listening, my friend, you're the bomb. I hope I get to see you again one day soon.
I hope I get to meet him.
I owe him lots because I mean I've made no shortage of use of Blue Steel in the past 10 years.
Yeah, it was awesome too because every time Tejas walked into a room, somebody said, "Ladies and gentlemen, Tejas, creator of Blue Steel," and then everybody
I threw him on my shoulder and carry. You know
what? We're all clapping like seals every time he came in the room. It was so great.
And then he's ducking under a table because he's embarrassed.
I was like, that'll get him to come back. Yeah.
Yeah. So Tejas worked on the view about getting that data to present correctly. And so it was funny, like we had a model and a view and a controller guy in the room kind of building this thing together. And then there were several other people in that room that offered a lot of like, do this, try this, have you thought about, that were also contributing the whole way. Eric Miltich was in there, just laughed at everything the whole time, which was awesome. He gave plenty of suggestions on what stuff should do. Adrian Carlson was in there as well, offering suggestions. So at the end, like the tool itself is really kind of bare bones, but under the hood, it's one of those things that like we could iterate on that just a couple more hours, maybe a day's worth of work, and it's going to really shine. In fact, we know we've proved out that we will actually have the ability for the teacher to click a button and have it push the grades back in. So like they won't have to run a report and key them. We exposed all the API endpoints for it to work. And it's going to load up a little JSON object. They can push the button and it'll write all the scores back, which is pretty neat.
So do you have a solution for when they deleted the scores and 15 minutes later they restored them and then they call you and say, I didn't mean to restore them?
A restore for the restore? Well, see, that's the beauty of Corey's hard work in the database is that you can choose all these other points, right? So it's sort of like you have Control Z and Control Y at the same time. For Mac users, just so you know, that's the undo and redo buttons. I don't know what it is on. I don't know what it is on your devices. But you can kind of roll back and forward to fix the gradebook. Hopefully, it doesn't cheese it up too bad.
That's awesome, and I think that's an important point. There is a limit to this, right? I can't call you and say, man, I screwed up 2 weeks ago. I just realized it. I want to pull this one assignment score back out. Right. I mean, when you guys were doing your investigating, I believe that flashback capability is dependent upon the number of records being written to a given table?
It's a bunch of stuff. It's your retention settings. It's the size of your database. It's how much churn is happening in the table. It has more to do with size. It has more to do with the amount of work happening in the database than it does have like with time. It's not like, oh, you have 2 days or you have 3 hours. Like if it's a weekend, you might get more time because there's less happening. Oh. But if it's like on grade submission day and there's tons of stuff happening, you might get 2 minutes. It's going to be really quick.
So it's not even like there's no other resets. Like a nightly process doesn't.
Whenever I've advertised to people that it's like, so I mean, without using, it fleshed out an idea like this, whenever I've used it for kind of disaster recovery, so to speak, or investigation, I say a day is about the maximum limit, I would say. But for the most part, I say about 6 to 8 hours is kind of the sweet spot. And just like Adam's saying, and I didn't know how the way you were describing it, the detail there, but references what my thoughts were, being that it depends on the table, it depends on the volume of records, it depends on the size of the data. So yeah, 6 to 8 hours is kind of your sweet spot with those for sure.
Yeah,
You know,
that's kind of a Vance question when it comes to the Oracle. You know, like, Vance, what do you think? He'd be like, oh, I know that it does, and he would tell you, like, this is all the stuff that affects it.
Oh, so
And
you're
we
saying
did
Vance
miss
knows
us.
things?
What's
Yeah,
that?
yeah, Vance knows some things.
Well,
We did miss us some Vance Allen at this latest conference. I'll say, Vance, if you're listening, buddy, we missed you.
Oh, he wasn't there?
No, he wasn't there. He was there in spirit.
No.
He was.
You could have
He's
just
actually
asked
in
him
the
on PSUG.io. He would have answered.
He would.
Exactly.
you say he
I
would
gotta
have
throw
answered?
out a little anecdote here,
Answered?
just because we're talking about the flashback. One time that this came in handy for me, I was on a client server, and this is every developer's worst nightmare, right? Like, you're on a client server, you're in production, and I took one of my files and deleted it, except it wasn't one of my files, and it was in CPM. It was in custom page management, and fortunately, I knew that the files in CPM are stored in the database, and the database has flashback capabilities. So, beep boop bop. You know, a little bit of elbow grease and a lot of sweat, and a couple hours later, we pulled that file. We pulled that record back out of CPM.
Nothing.
I've done that one
It's-
before too.
Yeah.
I've nuked a file that I needed and went and got it.
So talk to us about release times. When can our listeners hope to see this out on Easy Reg Pro?
Oh wow, what a great question.
It was a
Yeah.
great question, right?
I don't want to commit to anything, but
But you'll
I will
push it.
say this:
Get it,
we
commit.
finished up 2 weeks ago.
Get jokes.
We wrapped up the conference, and then the hope was, at least I want to say, because I was part of the Power Scheduler piece that Jerome had talked about, that we had hoped to get back together in about a month after. And I know I have been watching, and people are still committing code to our repository, updates and enhancements to what we were doing while we were together in Orlando. So I'm hoping a couple weeks from now, and at the time of recording, it is January the 3rd, 2023.
So by mid-January of 2023, you heard it from Eric. Is there a Schaitel guarantee?
I meant to say July. This road slush really hits you, man. Now we're mid March now, so hopefully sometime in April we'll have something out there for folks to pick up for the enhanced Power Scheduler.
I mean,
And Adam,
would
I
say
don't know.
if anybody has watched the podcast or met any of us, they know they can't believe anything that comes out of our mouth anyway. So,
And if anybody in the meantime, before we get things updated, has this teacher deleted their assignment scenario, if it hasn't been updated on EasyReg Pro acme.php yet, we will provide in the links to this episode Adam Larsen's personal email address and cell phone number.
there it is.
And
He works
homework, yeah.
mostly between midnight and 5 a.m., so call him during those hours.
Yeah.
Usually when he's bouncing a 2-year-old on his knee, trying to get him back to sleep, he's
No, wait,
furiously
that's
coding with his
sleep.
left hand.
It's the older one who doesn't. The
Oh,
little
same,
one
same.
sleep. Yeah. I don't know, man. Yeah, we should do though is we should post the query, because someone's gonna listen to this and go, "Oh man, I needed that yesterday." Well, I'll share the query with you guys. You can post it with the episode. Here's what you query. All right, you can post code in the YouTube comments or in the description.
You'll be able to, yeah.
Probably like just the basic bones of the flashback query.
Yeah,
or-
it's basic buttons. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same thing I have saved in a text document probably for you back then.
Yeah, from 4 years ago.
See below.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
Adam, I mean, what if somebody wanted to run that query, but they, were hosted or didn't have ODBC access to their database or something?
You just call Adam.
Yeah, right.
No, Adam knows what I'm fishing for.
Well, see, that's a whole nother story that involves you and me at a conference.
I believe that is a square on the Acme bingo card.
It is.
What I want to throw out there, my
been,
friend.
I don't think you're actually
Acme.
playing bingo, but I'm a little jealous that you might have been playing bingo.
No, it's a thing. We didn't have cards, but like we definitely have like a list of all the things that would go on a card if you had squares.
Nice.
Like here are all, like, because the thing is, like, if you've not been to one of these events, like there's a culture around it at this point, which is probably of all of the things, it's what I'm the proudest of, is that we have formed such camaraderie. Like there's so much social capital with the group about, what is Sumbits and what's a rear outer join, and
We have a gift for that, by the way.
Really?
Yeah,
Well, I can proudly claim ownership of that one.
yeah.
Wait, is free space?
You
meat,
have
by
no
the way?
choice but to claim ownership of that one, Ryan.
Is free space meat? I feel like it should be.
It's not meat. I think it's either Eric saying I've never worked in a school, or it was me hating something. One of those two things is the free space.
I think Eric
Adam
actually has a
hates it
shirt
when
now
Eric
that says that, right?
brings
Did I
up
see a
that
picture?
There
There are pictures. Yeah.
Yes. We
That's
should
fantastic.
post some pictures from Acme as well.
Yeah.
So the deal with, actually, we never even explained what ACME stands for. Advanced Customization.
Adam's customizations mimic excrement.
That's Eric's version.
That's the only one I've ever known.
Advanced customizations made for everyone, because it embodies the idea that all the stuff coming out of there is free, and it also gives us some Looney Tunes stuff so that we can make all kinds of jokes about the characters, like the Roadrunner and the Coyote and all of that kind of stuff, which is a good time. Where was I going with that? Those are things
Bingo
on,
cards.
yeah, on the bingo card. Okay, so there's a lot of capital that goes around the jokes that keep coming up time and again. So much so that we have to spend like an hour the first night just describing, so people don't feel left out. Like, here's funny things
What they
that have
all
happened before. Like, here's stuff you need to know about. Like, Nick Pirani has a secret webpage with all the things described on there so that you can get read into it and you don't feel like you're missing everything. Because we had several new people.
The Acme glossary.
Yes. Yeah, it's the data dictionary.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So one of the spaces on the bingo card was Eric and Adam telling the story about the time when we were in Myrtle Beach and Eric had a client server that was completely hosed with something not even to do with your plugins, but you had to sort out what was going on with was it a bad sequence? It was a database lock or
I think it
constraint.
was the sequence for a new extended field ID, extended record ID.
was hosed. So Eric was like, what we really need is a web-based SQL authoring tool so that we remotely, when we're not on site or don't have VPN access, or it's 9:00 at night and I can't even call the client to try to get access, like a screen share or a team viewer. And that's where SQL Studio came from. So that, I think that was in the spring. And I would say a year later, it was out for release. Although it was the versions that we used to hand around on flash drives at conferences. So like you come to the SQL session to learn about how to write queries, and we would hand this flash drive around with a zip file on it, and people would install it to their servers. Because we didn't have a distribution channel that we managed yet to be able to get it out there. That's where that came from.
AuroraEdTech.com.
That's the one. Thank you.
I use that plugin all the time too. I think it was one of your last times you were on the show where you said, "Hey, by all means, everybody use it."
Yeah.
It's been a time saver for me for sure.
I don't fire up anything else. I stopped using Navicat and SQL Developer a long time ago. I even when I'm on site and it's easy for me to see the IP address here locally, I still don't use anything else. I use SQL Studio. It's my daily driver.
It was a great tool for me to learn SQL. Gave me a playground to play around with SQL. So
and there's some guardrails there to keep you from really messing stuff up, which is good too. So yeah. So as far as Acme goes in the future, we're always taking suggestions. We put out the list on the listserv. I sent that email out this time like, hey, is there anything that you would like to see built? Is there an annoyance? And I don't remember. Is that where the power scheduler thing came from? Whose idea was that, Eric?
That was
I think that was from Paula and Rami and Naomi. I think they kind of suggested one of the things that was really annoying about X. So that's where that came from, I think.
That's really
Is
cool.
is there insertion points on Power Scheduler?
Yeah,
Okay, good.
because they just have the footer wildcard on everything. So you're
Oh, okay. It's the regular admin.
and they're not like dot action pages where it's going to be weird to find or anything. They're all just old school pages.
Cool. Good to know.
It's in March now, so we're like starting to schedule. And I was showing our new registrar some of the screens in there. She's like, I gotta click all these things. And I'm like, well, today you do, but in a year you might not have to. And we have a new registrar, so like I haven't looked at some of those screens in a while. And then helping her over her shoulder, I was like, man, this is awful. Like this.
Somewhere in the near to distant future, you may or may not have to continue to do that.
Yeah, we were clicking an associate button, and I was like, I'm pretty sure this one got taken care of. They made this so it can be associated. And the best compliment this group could ever get would be a PowerSchool was like, hey, we've heard from you that this needs to be improved. Can we incorporate this? Yeah, because like this group doesn't want to get paid for any of that, right? So like if they just said, oh, we're gonna, you've implemented this in a really good way, we're gonna make this happen in the next version, I think everyone would be like, awesome. Like,
yeah.
Here's some more suggestions, right?
Yeah. Get your foot in the door, right?
Speaking of the power scheduler enhancements, Jerome, it was Naomi, I think, right? Jerome's nodding. One of the things that we found as we got into working is like, oh man, and this is the thing about coming to either contribute, to learn, to collaborate, to do some of your own coding, to contribute ideas, to contribute code. Like we got to a point where we realized we could have spent the whole week replacing associate buttons with smart searches. But we developed a reusable model together as a group, and we decided we were going to move on and address something else. Like we could just spend the whole time doing that, and all we've done is replace associate buttons. So, the main focus of the group, then we eventually moved on to something else. But Naomi, if you're listening, thank you. Naomi sat there and paid attention to what else was going on. But meanwhile, in the background, she's like, I'm gonna reapply this reusable model that's been developed to these other pages.
Yep, she was the one who was churning them out.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and it was beautiful because it was just a lot of busy work that would have stopped us from talking more about new ideas and enhancing other features.
But if you modularize that in a good way, like anybody then that was in the room and saw how you did it could go in and start swapping those out in the future, right? Like that's work that should be happening in between ACMEs, not people watching each other do it, because once you've solved it a couple of times, anyone can really handle it.
Well, anyone ... But maybe, but Sean.
Yeah, I'll take that.
Poor guy.
Well, hey guys, I think I should.
He's gonna end it now.
Yeah,
On that
we're
note,
done.
On
We're
that
if
done.
you
note.
guys dog me anymore,
We're
I'd
done.
like to cut this off. Did we forget anything?
I have
Did we
full
forget
editing
like
rights.
any of the stuff? Like it is so much fun to work together with other developers. Like to see people light up and realize that this is their group is pretty awesome to see each time. Like Jerome, when he walked in that room that first time and was like, I found my people. Like I've never seen, so many horns. Like he was like, this is awesome. You are my people.
Yeah.
Over and again. It was great. Shoot, like Adrian Carlson got up and demoed an amazing customization they made in Lincoln, Nebraska for managing staff stuff.
Yeah, that
And
was
like,
incredible.
Seeing that guy go from not really being able to customize anything, and this is before ACME, but like a couple of years before, I was out at the Nebraska, one of the conferences there, the Central States Conference.
Wait, hold on. Look at Ryan's proud papa face right now. We've had this conversation with Ryan before, and because Ryan worked with Adrian
Correct.
in those early times, and we've had conversations. And Adrian, if you're listening and watching, because I'm sure you are, you're one of our fans here. We're all super happy for him, and to see where he is now is absolutely awesome to see.
Mhm.
He
Yep.
is so good. Brian, you would not have believed what he demoed in that session. Like, to see where he came from and what he's building now. I mean, it's like full on, like fully featured apps embedded inside of PowerSchool, all bootstrapped, and it is gorgeous. Like, I couldn't get over how good that stuff was. And like we've seen his progression over those years is terrific.
That's awesome.
It was so great. And like every year, somebody is like really stepping up and being like, "Hey, I made a thing. I want you to see." Like Jerome showed some stuff. It was awesome. And like, a year and a half ago, he was like, "I'm not sure I really belong here." And we, assuaged his concerns about that as soon as we could. But then the next one he comes and he's like, "Y'all, check out what I did." And he's like, he shows this thing off, and it was great. Like seeing people step up after just beginning is just, it's so incredibly rewarding to watch that development in people. It's way fun.
On that note, Adam, you should see some of the stuff I've been working on for a later time.
I like your hexagons. That's new. I haven't seen that before.
That is new. That's actually what I was going to show you. Spoiler.
He goes to the wall all by himself.
Yeah. Actually, I had a friend help me. It's kind of my thing. Anyway, I was gonna say, I think on the behalf of all of our watchers and listeners, what you guys are doing with ACME, especially seeing some products come out of that, and like really coming from the users on problems to solve, is awesome. And I think the whole community really appreciates what you're doing. And hopefully we can get some more people as a part of the community.
Mhm.
So Jerome, Adam, thanks for joining us today. Eric, Ryan.
Yep.
Glad to be back into it. Hopefully we get a little more normal on our schedule of Sumbits episodes. But thanks everybody for watching. Until next time. Thank you.
Thanks,
All right.
friends.
Thanks.
Everybody.
Thanks for joining us, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today. Enjoy more episodes and learn more at mba-link.com.